Hello guys, this is Donald's Movies, and today I got something a bit different. In the previous video I talked about how important the Burning Legion is and their influence, but since then I've been thinking about it a bit more and I kinda wanted to make a more detailed video. What would the universe and Azeroth look like without the Burning Legion, and how would it affect all of the races? So, without further ado, let's get into the video. The Burning Legion was created at an unknown point in time by the fallen titan Sargeras when he smashed the prison of all demons called Mardum. Ever since then, they have been conquering, destroying, and enslaving entire worlds, constantly bolstering their numbers and might. As far as we know, Azeroth is the only world they have never really conquered, even though they invaded it multiple times. The thing is though, every time we have repelled them, the price was more than great. So, now going through the entire timeline, I'm going to list all of the events that will be completely different from what they are now, and by the end you might get the idea of how different everything would be in the absence of the Legion. The first crucial event is the corruption of Eredar. Most of you already know the story. Sargeras contacted the three great leaders, corrupted two while Velen fled with the Draenei. Those two, Kil'jaeden and Archimonde, turned out to be the best commanders and were in some way the left and the right hand of Sargeras. But what would happen if they were never contacted at all? It is a bit hard to speculate due to our lack of knowledge of their actual homeworld of Argus, but most likely they would not turn into a sinister race. The Draenei would have also never been created, which means that they would have no need to escape or search for a new home. Why is this really important to us? Well, the Draenei would never reach Draenor, and Draenor would most likely never even be named Draenor in the first place. This leads to the second event and the second race, the Orcs. We know that the Orcs were a tool of Kil'jaeden and his plan of destroying the Draenei, and then later used for a different purpose. Obviously, if there are no Draenei or the Legion, the Orcs would still remain as a shamanistic race and would not be corrupted. Whether they would survive or not is not really known because there are all these other big ogre-like races, so that is still in question, but nevertheless, at least they would not become tools of the Legion. Now the Orcs lead us to the most important event in Warcraft, as this is really what Warcraft was originally based on, the Orc invasion. The Orc invasions would never happen, and the portal would never have been opened. On the other side, on Azeroth, Medivh would never get corrupted by the spirit of Sargeras, pretty much not becoming evil. The Black Morass would still remain a swamp, and King Lane Vryn would still be alive. In turn, the Alliance as we know it today would most likely not take place, and Gilneas would not get isolated as a kingdom. So obviously now you can see how everything kinda has like a snowball effect. Legion, Draenei, Orcs, humans, and the list just goes on and on. Alright, so now that we have covered the outside parts, let's get a glimpse into what Azeroth would be like. 10,000 years ago, the Burning Legion first made contact with the world of Azeroth. They sensed the powers of the Well of Eternity, and that was their link. The Highborn Night Elves were abusing the arcane powers and were almost 100% responsible. However, if there was no Legion, the Highborn would probably continue to use and improve on the arcane powers. Ashara would also still be alive and she would be the queen, although we don't really know if she would have led them to some other type of corruption in the future. Now the most important thing here is the Well of Eternity, because we know that it would not explode and the entire world would look completely different without the separate continents and all the little islands and all that stuff. All of the casualties of the War of the Ancients would still be with us, most importantly the Ancients, and also the Satyr would never become a race on their own. This in turn means that there would be no War of the Satyr some thousands of years later, and most likely no development of the Worgen curse, meaning that the Worgen as a race, or as a curse I guess, would not even exist at all. Another crucial thing are the High Elves. We know that they were Night Elves once and were exiled for their magical use, mainly because everyone was already so scared from the first Legion invasion. Since there are no separate continents, they couldn't just take a ship from Kalimdor to the Eastern Kingdoms, but just not inhabiting that north part of the Eastern Kingdoms is a really big deal. We know that the Amani Troll Empire was there and would most likely thrive, while the humans below them would never learn the ways of the arcane from the elves, and Delran would never even be created. My speculation is, if there was like this mega continent, that all of the relations that we know of today would be completely different. Maybe the humans would have met the Night Elves first, or the Tauren, or even went to war with the Night Elves or the Tauren or the Trolls, so possibilities are just endless. Now at this point, it is impossible to go forward because everything that has happened after this point was affected by the Sundering and the world would just take a big 180. Most of the races we know today, especially the playable ones, would not exist. We would not have the Orcs, no Forsaken, and no Blood Elves or even High Elves, no Worgen, and no Draenei. Huge events such as the Third War and the Scourge invasion would also not come in place. So, my final vision of what the world would be like without the Legion is one big continent, the Night Elves spreading and still growing as arcane users. The Trolls would also be powerful as they were one of the strongest races before the Sundering broke them apart, but since we know that the Night Elf magic was devastating against the Trolls, it wouldn't be impossible for the Night Elves to take over the Trolls or at least ruin a few of their empires. The Old God minions would not get split apart as well and might have even done something even worse for the world than the Burning Legion invasion. On the other hand, the human kingdoms might not have grown in the same way, and they most likely would not have the magical abilities that they have today. In conclusion, the world would be a completely different place and the universe, and it is interesting to think how just one Titan's corruption far away from Azeroth affected everything we know thus far. So with this video, I think you finally get the idea of how important the Burning Legion is, and this is why I always say they are the central part of lore and that there is no other entity as important, I guess apart from maybe the Titans, but the Burning Legion is just so influential and pretty much directly and indirectly behind the entire story. Alright, that's all I have for this video. Now do give me some feedback on what you think about these speculation theory type videos, and also don't forget to like and subscribe if you're not subscribed to the channel already, as it really helps out and keeps all the videos going. Thanks a lot for taking the time out of your day to watch this video, and see you next time.